Hi, my name is Richard, and I'm in 10th grade. Together with my partner Kevin, we created a project for the digital game design category. I worked on the gameplay aspects, and Kevin worked on the introduction portion. Most of the art that you will see here has been drawn by our friend Eric. Kevin composed the music used for the menu, while I composed music for the gameplay.
So I will now take you through the introduction portion of the game, which is the part that I worked on. Purpose-wise for this game, I think it's really anyone's dream to make their own game. We play a lot of games, so we never really truly get to implement the parts we like. So that is what me and my partner did for our game, Winds of the Forgotten. Initially, we did not know what language to write in, but a little more research revealed that drawing in Java is much more difficult than drawing in Python through Pygame. Though my partner was rather fluent in Python, which made this process a lot easier, I had initially began with Java, so that was a bit of a initial hurdle that I had to jump through. Creativity-wise, me and my partner really enjoyed the visual and musical aspects of the games that we had played before, so that is a part that we really wanted to emphasize in our game that we made here. In fact, if you we're on the menu screen right now, and in the background you can hear some music, which is actually a song that I composed. Later on during the actual gameplay, you'll hear some background music as well, which was my partner composed that. Furthermore, if you for the visual aspect, you can see that the buttons actually glimmer themselves, and the arrows on the buttons go in and go out. Along with the title, these are all hand drawn, which once again we really wanted to focus on during this project. UI wise, we wanted to keep the game simple, so only the WASD and return keys are used. The player can focus more on the game rather than trying to make sure they are pressing the right keys. If you see currently, if I use the WASD keys, you can see the arrows actually go up and down to indicate which option you are currently highlighting. Later on, when I press the return or enter key, you'll see the screen fade out and then fade back in to the character choosing screen. This was, once again, a portion we really enjoyed because it really pushes the visual quality of our game. I will now do that for the play button, and you will see the screen fade out and fade back in. So now we are on the character choosing portion of the game. Once again, if I use the WASD keys, you'll see that different characters are highlighted. And you'll also see that the character portraits themselves, they're also hand-drawn, and that's once again our creativity aspect. And if I press return or enter on different characters, you'll see that character actually goes into the gameplay, which my partner will now show.
Alright, I'll choose the character on the left, and let's begin. As you can see here, the monster that we're fighting will pause for a moment, and then it'll begin shooting at us. The track that you're hearing here was composed by me. So the first phase consists of it firing aimed barrage while moving in a predetermined pattern. If I get hit by a bullet, like there, I'll lose half a heart, as you can see in the corner. I've also significantly reduced the amount of health the monster has for demonstration purposes, so the phases aren't too long. In its second phase, it moves back to a starting position and continues to fire out aim shots, but also adding radial blue shots, which also fire smaller blue shots, as you can see. Alright. And in its third phase, it'll start to chase the player at a speed slightly slower than that of the player, and now it fires red radial arc shots, and it continues to fire aim shots, this time closing in on the player to mimic biting down. And once the player or the monster has been defeated, the game will return to the menu screen.
I have personally learned a lot of new skills while programming this game. Not only for the syntax of the game in Python, as I had really used Java before, but more about the geometry aspects of a screen. For example, on this menu screen, you can see the buttons. If we wanted to center them, it's really not better to place them at certain pixels, but we can say set it at half the screen size. Me and my partner also learned a lot more about the design process. We hadn't really worked on such a big project before, so we had to set our personal own deadlines to, for example, a title screen should be on due this day, and so forth. For further improvements, me and my partner would really like to add more levels, and possibly even add upgrades for the character, such as being able to shoot different bullets. Furthermore, we'd also like to add more animations, and fix up small glitches like the menu screen fade in and fade out.
Since we built this entire game from scratch using the Pygame library, there were a lot of barriers that we had to overcome in its production. For example, one issue that we continually ran into was the issue of optimization. Of course, we want all of our games to run as smoothly as possible, so we had to make sure that each frame wouldn't take up too much processing power, otherwise the frames will start to drop and the experience won't be as smooth. In order to overcome this issue, I individually went through functions printing out how much time they took in order to determine the problems that we needed to fix. A new skill that I learned to apply was the use of vector arithmetic and derivatives. For the enemy to aim its shots, it needs to determine how to shoot it, which I calculated by taking the distance vector between the enemy and the player and dividing by a constant times the length of the vector in order to have evenly firing aim shots. The same concept is using the third phase to make the monster chase the player, but applying to the monster instead of its bullets. Also, I had to use derivatives to calculate trajectories, since our game relied on the use of velocities rather than directly changing positions. In order to form the path for the first phase, I first calculated the equation that determined the path, then I took the derivatives for the x and y formulae to determine the velocities. Currently, things that we could add to the project are improvements to the sprites, such as adding movement animation to the player and firing animation for the monster, as well as having a proper game over and winning screen. Also, we have a story written up for the game, but we haven't had the chance to implement it yet. Of course, we want to have more levels in the future rather than just this one monster. I also want to be able to improve the soundtrack and add more pieces. If I had to do it all over again, I would have put more time throughout the year to work on this project, as the bulk of the time we put in was over the last week.
I would say the easiest part was actually working with my teammate. We had worked well and we've worked a lot in the past, so it was rather easy talking and communicating with one another and pushing each other when we really needed to hurry up and as the deadline got closer. The most challenging part was probably actually in the geometry aspects. We really wanted everything to be visually pleasing, so the buttons, for example, had to be in the middle, so everything had to be aligned, and this required a lot more calculations. Later on, you'll see, you saw previously that in the bullets, the way they traveled actually required calculus, and we had to take derivatives to get the proper angle. From this, I really learned not only more coding, but how to approach different problems. For geometry, we initially did just based on the pixel, right? But instead, we had to think more generally, and we eventually did based on the screen size. Like, it would be at screen size 1/2, height 1/2, length 1/2. So that's one thing I learned. The most fun was actually probably animation. It's really fun to see everything come together. The glimmer that you currently see on the screen was really interesting and fun to make. One of the most fun animations was actually the fade in and fade out.
The easiest part, and also the most fun part I would say, was actually coming up with the bullet formations and coding them in once I had finished building the framework. That being said, the framework, by which I mean the system of how the bullets, player, and enemy interact, such as bullet collisions with the player and enemy, how it affects the health and invincibility frames, all that stuff was likely the most challenging part of the project as I had to build it all from scratch.
All music was composed by me and my partner. Art was drawn by our friend Eric. And the only piece of part that we did not hand make was the background for this part, which was drawn by a person named Daskin Deland.